Take a quick pause. Did you know that over 90% of you watching haven't hit the subscribe button yet? If you're enjoying this video, take a second to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us bring you more gripping stories every day. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments so we can see how far our stories are reaching. Your support really keeps us going. Now, let's jump back into the video. I always told myself I wasn't going to end up like my old man. You know the type. The kind of man who drinks his breakfast and throws fists when words fail him, which was often. I grew up watching my mother flinch at every sound, every creak in the floorboards, every word that didn't sit right with him. That was my childhood. A house full of silence so loud it screamed. I ran from that life, ran hard. By the time I was 17, I was living out of my buddy Nate's basement. He was the only one who didn't flinch when I talked about my family. Said I had fire in me, something that needed to burn in the right direction. I didn't know what he meant back then, but I remembered those words. Fire. Direction. I carried them like a compass, even when I didn't know which way was north. I started working construction. Woke up before the sun, came home covered in dust, hands like stone. But it was honest. It was mine. Eventually, I worked my way up. Got certified, got steady work. Bought a used truck that rattled when it hit 60, but never let me down. By 28, I had my own small team in a modest apartment, in a neighborhood where gunshots were rare and kids rode bikes without fear. That's when I met her. Rachel, she was a nurse. The kind of woman who smiled with her eyes and listened like it mattered. I didn't think I deserved someone like her, not with the mess I came from. But she made me believe maybe I could be more. So I tried. I cleaned up, started saving, learned to soften my rough edges. We got married 2 years later. Small ceremony, backyard, cheap decorations. But it was perfect. She was radiant. And for the first time in my life, I felt peace. When our son Eli was born, something cracked open in me. I remember holding him, this little thing with my nose and her eyes, and thinking, this is my second chance. I wasn't going to let the fire inside burn everything down like it did for my father. I was going to be different. For a while, I was. I coached his little league team, took on fewer jobs to be around more. Every night, I kissed Rachel's forehead and thanked whatever force kept me from becoming the man I feared. But you can't outrun blood. Not forever. It started subtle. Rachel grew quiet. Not in a way that screamed betrayal, just distant. I chalked it up to stress. Her shifts were long, and I knew nursing drained her. I tried to help more around the house, plan little surprises, show her I still saw her. But something was off. You know when someone you love stops looking at you the same way? Not with hate. Worse, indifference. Like you've turned into background noise. Then there was Nate. Yeah, that Nate. The same kid whose couch I crashed on when I had nowhere to go. He was always around, at first like a brother. Eli loved him, called him Uncle Nate. He'd take him fishing, play video games, even showed up to school events when I couldn't. It meant a lot to me having someone like that in our corner. Until I started noticing things. The way Rachel smiled when he made jokes, smiled in a way she hadn't for me in months. The quick glances, the inside jokes I wasn't a part of. Once, I came home early from a job and found them sitting too close on the couch. Nothing happened, not that I saw, but silence fell thick between them when I walked in, like they'd been talking about me. I tried to bury it, told myself I was being paranoid, that it was my past whispering lies into my ears. My father was jealous, possessive. I didn't want to become him, but gut instincts don't lie, not when you've spent your whole life learning how to read people for survival. One night, I stayed up late in the garage, said I had paperwork. Truth is, I waited. Around 10, I heard Nate's truck pull up. I didn't know he was coming over. I didn't even know Rachel had called him. I sat there in the dark, heart pounding, ears straining for any sound that might give truth a voice. Laughter, her laugh. Soft, warm, the kind I hadn't heard in months. I should have walked in. But I didn't. I waited like a coward. I waited and listened, and when the silence stretched too long, when my thoughts got loud enough to hurt, I went back inside. They were sitting at opposite ends of the couch, TV on, some cooking show. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers, but I didn't. I just stood there and asked, "Everything all right?" Rachel jumped like I'd caught her doing something wrong. Nate stood up too quick, wiped his hands on his jeans like they were dirty. "Yeah," he said, "just dropping off some stuff." Rachel needed help with the faucet. I looked at the sink. No tools, no water, no sign of work. Still, I nodded. "Thanks." He left in a hurry. Rachel wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling wondering where I went wrong. Had I stopped being enough? Had I slipped into the same patterns I swore I'd never repeat? The next few weeks were a blur. I started keeping track. Times Nate came over. Times Rachel worked late. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Waited. Then one day, I came home early again. Eli was at a friend's house. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I walked in and heard Rachel's voice, soft, behind a closed door. I crept down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. The bedroom door was slightly open. I saw shadows. Heron and Nate's. I didn't barge in. I didn't scream. I just walked back to the kitchen and sat at the table. Waited, hands shaking, heart a war drum. They came out 20 minutes later trying to play it off. But the damage was done. Rachel froze when she saw me. Nate paled. I didn't say a word, just looked at them. Really looked. "I trusted you," I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine. "Both of you." Rachel tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." Nate took a step forward. "It wasn't supposed to happen." I laughed, cold and hollow. "That's what they all say, right? Wasn't supposed to happen." I walked out before they could spin any more lies. I drove around for hours, parked by the docks, watched the water until sunrise, and cried. I hadn't cried since my mom died. But that night, I let the boy inside me weep, the one who believed in loyalty, in love, in second chances. When the sun came up, I went home, packed a bag, kissed Eli's forehead while he slept, and I left. Not forever, but long enough to figure out who I was without them. Long enough to remember what kind of man I swore I'd be. Not my father, not a ghost, a better man, even if it meant walking away from the people who broke me. I didn't go far, just a small motel off the highway, peeling paint, buzzing sign, the kind of place you only stay when you got nowhere else. But I needed the distance. I needed space to breathe without the weight of their faces in every room. I sat on that stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling fan spin like it held the answers I didn't have. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't always come with screaming or slammed doors. Sometimes it creeps in soft, like rot under fresh paint. And by the time you smell the decay, it's already eaten through the foundation. I kept playing that night over and over in my head. The way Nate stepped back when he saw me sitting there, the panic in Rachel's eyes like she'd been caught in a lie she'd convinced herself wasn't really a lie. I wanted to believe it was just a mistake. One slip, one night. But deep down, I knew. You don't get that kind of silence between two people unless something's been building for a while. I didn't tell Eli anything. How could I? He was just a kid. All he knew was that Daddy had to go away for a while to clear his head. That's how Rachel put it in the text she sent the next day. "Please, let's talk. Eli misses you. I made a mistake. Just come home." But what kind of home was it now? I didn't answer. Not for a few days. I needed time to remember who I was before them. Before I became a husband, a father, a man tied so tightly to people who had unraveled everything we'd built. And in that little motel room, between vending machine dinners and sleepless nights, I started thinking about identity. Mine. My father used to say a man was only as good as his word, but he broke his word every chance he got. I grew up watching his fists say things his mouth wouldn't, and now here I was, standing at the edge of becoming a man I swore I'd never be. But walking away didn't feel like strength. It felt like failure. I kept thinking about Eli, his laugh, his goofy dance moves, the way he'd run to the door when I came home. I wasn't there to protect him now, not from bullies, not from heartbreak, not from the quiet confusion I knew he must have been feeling every day I didn't come back. I finally texted Rachel back, said I wanted to see Eli, just him. She agreed. We met at a diner halfway between the house and the motel. He came running toward me like nothing had changed, threw his arms around my waist and held on like he was afraid I might disappear again. I nearly broke down right there in the parking lot. We sat at a booth by the window. He talked about school, his new art project, the dog at his friend's house, all the normal stuff. But I could tell he was holding something back. Kids don't always say what they're feeling, but you can see it in the way they avoid your eyes or fidget with their hands. And I could tell he knew something was off. After he went to the restroom, Rachel slid into the seat across from me. I didn't invite her, but I didn't tell her to leave either. She looked tired. Not just physically, something deeper. Like guilt had settled into her bones. "I'm sorry," she said. No preamble, no excuses. I didn't respond, just looked out the window. "I never meant for it to happen. It started when you were working those double shifts, and Nate, he was just there. It wasn't supposed to be anything." That's the second time I've heard that line, I said, my voice quieter than I expected. She reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back. "You broke something, Rach, and not just between us. Between me and him. He was like a brother to me, do you get that?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I know, and I hate myself for it." I believe that, or at least part of me did. But hate doesn't undo choices. It doesn't stitch the tear in your trust. "I'm not here for apologies," I said. "I'm here for Eli, that's it." We agreed to shared custody, no lawyers, no drama, just for him. The next few months were hard. Every time I dropped him off, Nate's truck was in the driveway. Sometimes I'd see him mowing the lawn or playing catch with Eli, and every time I did, that fire inside me started to burn again. I wanted to confront him, wanted to ask how he could do that to me, how he could sit across from me for years, laugh with me, cry with me, and still go behind my back like I was nothing. But I didn't. Because Eli was watching. Always watching. One day, I picked Eli up early from school. It was a Friday. We got ice cream, went to the park. Just the two of us. I watched him climb the jungle gym, his face lit with joy, and I realized something. I couldn't carry this anger forever. Not without it changing me. That night, back at my apartment, he asked, "Dad, why don't you live with me and Mom anymore?" I froze. I knew that question was coming, but it still hit like a punch. "Because sometimes people make choices that hurt others," I said slowly. "And when that happens, it's not always easy to stay in the same place." "Did you hurt Mom?" he asked. "No," I said, "but she hurt me." He didn't respond right away, just nodded slowly. Then he leaned against me and whispered, "I still love you." I held him tight. That moment became the turning point. I started therapy, something I used to laugh at back when I thought talking about your feelings was weakness. But I needed it. I needed to make sense of everything: the betrayal, the loss, the weight of fatherhood, the fear that maybe, just maybe, the broken pieces of my past were still sharp enough to cut the people I loved. I learned how to speak instead of silence, how to feel without drowning, how to hold the pain without letting it own me. One evening, about 6 months after the split, Nate showed up at my apartment. No call, no warning. Just knocked on the door like we were still friends. I opened it, stared at him, didn't say a word. He looked nervous, eyes darting to the floor, hands shoved in his pockets. "I'm not here to defend what I did," he said. I needed to say it to your face. I messed up. I messed up bad." I nodded. "Yeah, you did. I never meant to hurt you. You were like a brother to me." "Then why?" He looked up, eyes red. "I don't know. Weakness, stupidity, loneliness. I could say 100 things, but none of them matter. What matters is I betrayed you, and I lost the only real friend I ever had." I stood there searching for something inside me: anger, forgiveness, anything. What I found was tiredness. "I'm not going to pretend like it didn't destroy something in me," I said, "but I'm not going to let it define me either." He nodded slowly. "I get that." I closed the door. Not out of hate, out of peace. Because some chapters don't need closure, just an ending. That night, I wrote in the journal my therapist gave me. First time I filled more than a page. I wrote about my son, about strength, about how sometimes redemption isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about choosing to keep walking anyway. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll trust someone again. Maybe not. But I know this. I didn't become my father. I didn't let the fire consume me. And every time Eli smiles, I know I did at least one thing right. A full year passed before I saw Rachel and Nate together again. It was at Eli's school play. He was dressed like a tree. Yeah, a tree. And he took his role more seriously than anything I'd seen. I sat in the second row with my phone ready, trying not to smile too big when he waved at me from the stage. The innocence in his eyes, it still cut me sometimes, not in a painful way. More like a reminder that no matter what mess adults make of their lives, kids still look for light, still search for what's solid and safe. Rachel sat 2 rows behind me, Nate beside her. I caught them in my peripheral, and for a second I felt it again. That old tension in my jaw, the heat in my chest. But it faded. Or maybe I just let it go. After the play, Eli came running into my arms, proud as ever. "Did you see me? I didn't forget any lines." "You were the best tree up there," I said, ruffling his hair. Rachel approached slowly. "Hey," she said, almost unsure if she had the right to speak. "Hey." There was a pause. She looked tired again, but not guilty. Just worn down, like the weight of her own choices had finally settled in. "I know it's not my place to ask, but are you okay?" she asked. "Getting there," I said, and I meant it. She nodded. "He really looks up to you. He talks about you all the time." I looked down at Eli, who was already pulling me toward the hallway, babbling about getting ice cream. "I look up to him too," I said quietly, "more than he knows." That night, after I dropped him off and came back to the apartment, I sat on the balcony. It wasn't much, just 2 plastic chairs and a railing with chipped paint. But it felt like mine. A space I'd made with my own hands. A place I could breathe. I thought a lot about identity that night. How people see you. How you see yourself. There was a time I thought being a good man meant always doing the right thing. But now I think it's more about what you do after the wrong things happen. Who you choose to become when the world's given you every excuse to fall apart. And I'd had excuses. Plenty. I grew up with a mother who did her best and a father who did the opposite. The streets raised me in ways I'm still trying to unlearn. I saw things before I could spell them. Fought to be seen when the world didn't care if I disappeared. But I tried to build something better. For Eli. For myself. And even though the people I trusted most tore holes in that, I didn't fall all the way through. I climbed out. I started volunteering on weekends. Just a few hours at a youth center. Nothing dramatic. Helping with homework, shooting hoops, listening when they talked about the stuff most adults ignore. Some of those kids reminded me of myself. Same fire, same anger, same hunger to matter. One kid, Deshaun, latched onto me quick. 14, smart mouth, eyes too tired for someone his age. He reminded me of my younger self in the worst and best ways. He asked questions most people didn't have answers for. "You ever want to hit somebody so bad but you know it won't fix nothing?" "Yeah," I told him. "All the time." "So what do you do instead?" I looked at him and said, "You build something they can't take from you." He squinted. "Like what?" "Like peace, like pride, like a life where you don't need their approval to know your worth." He nodded slow, like he was still chewing on it. It hit me later that night. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but using your pain to keep someone else from making the same mistake. It was a quiet kind of power, not the kind that makes headlines, the kind that lives in silence and choices and long roads that lead somewhere better. Rachel called one evening, months later. Said she and Nate had split up. "I thought it would last," she admitted. "But it was built on something broken. Maybe it never had a chance." I didn't say much. It wasn't my place to gloat. Truthfully, I didn't feel satisfaction. Just a deep, strange sadness. For her, for all of us, for the fact that some choices ripple longer than you think. We kept things civil, better than civil even. We learned how to co-parent without bitterness. We learned how to talk without reopening wounds. I think we both knew we'd never go back to what we were, but we didn't need to hate each other to move forward. One afternoon, after picking up Eli from school, he asked me something out of the blue. "Dad, are you happy?" It caught me off guard. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because I wasn't sure how to answer. So I paused, took a breath. "I'm learning to be," I said. He tilted his head. "What does that mean?" "It means life isn't always simple, but I'm building something that feels real, and that makes me proud." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he didn't fully, but one day he will. A few weeks later, I found an old photo in a shoebox. Me and Nate, early 20s, arms around each other, grinning like fools at a backyard BBQ. Back before the betrayals, before the broken trust. I stared at it a long time. Then I put it away. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need to live in the past anymore. I'd spent so long thinking I was defined by the worst things that happened to me. But now I think we're defined by what we do with them, how we rise, who we choose to become. The legacy we leave in small moments, like showing up to a school play or telling a kid that their anger doesn't have to own them. Eli's growing fast, taller every week, smarter too. He asks bigger questions now, about life, about people, about what makes someone good. I don't always have the answers, but I'm there. I listen, I try. That's the thing I'm most proud of. I'm not perfect. I never will be. But I'm present, I'm honest. And I've learned that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is stay open, even after the world's given you every reason to close off. I still sit on that balcony sometimes, long after the sun goes down. Not to escape, just to reflect. I look at the sky, think about the man I was, the man I almost became, and the man I'm choosing to be now. And I whisper more to myself than anyone else. You made it through. You didn't break. You built something they couldn't take. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.